Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Horizon Zero Dawn video release day stream. This is the first one of these that we're doing, so we're just going to try some stuff out and see how it goes. But we're excited to get to chat with you. I'm going to very quickly do introductions for people who don't know us. So I am Michael Tucker, creator of Story Mode, along with these fine gentlemen, and Lessons from the Screenplay and Beyond the Screenplay. I am joined by the Story Mode team: Brian Bittner.
Hello, hello.
Alex Galleros.
Hi.
And Wyatt Strain.
Hi.
Wyatt's a newcomer. If anyone follows Lessons from the Screenplay or Beyond the Screenplay, you're probably like, who's that guy? We added him for story mode reasons. He's cool. He's cool also.
He's become like an expert game capture artist without meaning to.
It's a little generous.
He offered, and now he can never stop. So yeah, when you're watching all the videos and you're seeing all of the B-roll of cameras flying around places, basically anything you're actually seeing from the game, Wyatt has captured. So Wyatt is our game capture artist.
The team has become like video game cinematographers, which you didn't realize was like a thing.
Yeah,
right.
Which is a real job.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing with this whole thing is that we're going to have, so Wyatt is playing through the Horizon Zero Dawn DLC, Frozen Wilds, which I have actually never played, so I'm very curious to see it play out. I hear it's very pretty. So Wyatt's going to be playing that, and the rest of us are going to be chatting about Horizon Zero Dawn and storytelling in video games and answering questions that you guys have. So please feel free to send us questions in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them. And so I'm excited. We have Larry. Larry's already here. This is great. I'm also at my mother's house. It still has a landline phone, so that might occasionally start ringing.
I was like, what is that sound?
I know. It freaks me out.
Amazing. Blast from the
If I
past.
can mute it. Oh, there it goes. Okay.
I mean, it gives this whole thing like a nice retro gaming feel, right? Like,
Right.
we're suddenly all 10 years old and like there's a landline going on somewhere in the house.
Cool. So I wanted to kind of just start off by talking about my first experience with Horizon Zero Dawn and kind of then getting everybody's impressions, because I think the arc of this game and how it was released and how it kind of became this sleeper hit is really interesting. So I remember seeing the trailer for it at one of the E3s, I think, and kind of brushing it off and thinking like, oh, that looks pretty, that there's like big robot dinosaurs walking around, but assumed it would just be a dumb action game where you're just blowing up robot dinosaurs the whole time. And so kind of didn't think about it, and then heard over time like really popular reviews and all this stuff, and then I actually got a message on LinkedIn from John Gonzalez, the narrative director, who had watched Lessons from the Screenplay and had reached out to see if I did any like writing for video games and if I wanted to chat with him. But I never checked my LinkedIn, and so he had sent me that message like 3 months ago, and then when I replied, he never actually replied. But at that point, I was like, I should probably play this game that he's worked on. And so that's when I finally played Horizon Zero Dawn and was amazed to find the awesome storytelling and the really just the beauty of it and the compelling experience that it creates and just how much fun it was to play. So that was my experience coming to Horizon Zero Dawn. Brian, what was your experience?
Really quick.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Silence is about to say something in the game.
Oh.
Oh.
Is it important? Should we stop and listen?
Are you telling me silence so you can listen to silence? More jokes like that coming up in the next hour, folks.
I also just love that Michael's introduction to the game was brushing off, like by accident, the
Right.
game designer, like offering him maybe a job to write for the game or something.
Yeah, that was one of those oops moments. But
It's like, you're just so big.
To,
It's like,
then,
you don't have time for this guy.
just don't use
But
the
as
shit.
usual, you will do as you wish. Her name is Elizabeth Sobek.
Wait, so are we pausing to hear something in the game?
Yeah,
Or?
is it very close?
I wonder how much of a delay there is, because
Might be a delay. I think we should just let Brian say his thing,
Sounds good.
and we can read the subtitles. We'll hear the next silence quote.
Yeah, Lance Reddick's got enough attention. He's in all the John Wick movies and stuff. Like, he's fine. No, I sort of hit a point where with gaming, I was like not paying super close attention to a lot of the sort of more action adventure kind of games, like the AAA titles, just because I sort of felt like they tend to be a little samey. And I'm more just like, give me like the crazy open world, like thousands of quests, you know, real choice and consequence, design my character kind of stuff, or give me like puzzle games, that kind of thing. So a lot of them sort of fell by the wayside. And then as we were starting to work on story mode, I sort of finally dived into Spider-Man and God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn, and was like, oh, okay. Like I sort of didn't appreciate that, like this sort of, it's almost like the blockbuster movies and video games, you know, the sort of like the big explosive thing, like how good they had gotten and how like not only fun the gameplay was, but how good the storytelling was and the voice acting and everything. So it's been a real pleasure to catch up on some of these games that and not that I brushed them off. I just thought, well, yeah, if I'm gonna sink 20 hours into a game, I don't know if this is the one I want to do right now. Maybe later, and then finally picking up these games and diving into them was just a real pleasure.
Yeah, and as Aliub says in chat, I feel like it's one of the reasons I was really happy that it had a PS4, and it was yet another title in the PS4 lineup that made me super happy to have kind of made the switch from Team Xbox to Team PlayStation.
Yeah,
I think the Sony like PlayStation exclusives are just they're my kind of game, so it's just been a no-brainer to be in that console family from.
Yeah, I was pretty hardcore into Halo for a very long time,
right.
So it was like a no question Xbox thing, but those days are in the past now. But so, Alex, what about you? What was your first experience with Horizon Zero Dawn?
Well, you've been telling me to play it for a while, but you know, pre-story mode, I had not been prioritizing video games in my life, just because I love video games, and I have played things like the Mass Effect trilogy through maybe 3 times. So when I get into a game, I really get into a game, and I particularly do end up loving these kind of RPG, big story world kind of AAA games. Like that is usually my jam. So this is totally my jam. And but the funny part was, because I was basically playing it to quickly prepare for making this Horizon Zero Dawn video. I really didn't play it in the right way. Like I think it's a game that you're supposed to kind of take your time with and do side quests and explore and find those calls. Like as you're going through the main quest, you're kind of doing these things on the side as well. And I was just like stressed out trying to get to like Maker's End and the main quest, so I like wasn't spoiled by like the script we were all writing. So it was funny because I was playing this game and I was finding it like really difficult. Like my weapons, my armor were crap, and I wasn't leveled up enough for the things I was doing. And so I've recently been playing it just more casually and just like not ignoring the main quest and just exploring and doing everything else, and I've loved it. Like it, I now feel like I have some mastery of like how to take down the different kinds of robot dinosaurs. I love using what's the one kind of arrow that basically gives a little sonic boom on the robot and like removes their components.
Tear Blast.
Tear Blast. I fucking love the Tear Blast. You know, like I have all my strategies now. I killed like one of those goddamn huge like T-Rex ones to get the crystal braidings. Now I have a big slingshot. That's, you know, so I'm in that place now where like I've like invested in, you know, building my gear in the world, and once you're there, like my parents I think are kind of worried about me because I'm staying with them during the holidays, and I don't think they've ever witnessed me playing video games so continuously ever, like in my adult life. I'm just like, wow, like is this all for work? Like this is a lot of like,
well, you have the perfect justification now.
Yeah, and I mean now Cyberpunk's coming out, and I definitely have to play that so I can talk to you guys about it for work. So
Mom, leave me alone, I'm working.
You know,
bring me some milk.
It's required. But it's funny it's funny this, you know, this job, you know, working with story mode, there's like this weird like there is kind of a funny pressure of, you know, watching a movie for lessons from the screenplay is an easy one afternoon or one evening thing, and then I can talk to you guys about it. But if we need to talk about Cyberpunk to like think about making a Cyberpunk video, how much of the game do I have to play to be able to talk about it with you guys, or to know what kind of video should be made? It could be, 80 hours. So yeah, it's a funny different thing, which, not the worst problem to have in the world.
Yeah, it's definitely that's something we can talk about too if people are interested. The change in what goes into making a video for story mode was surprising. Like, I think we all knew that making a video game video essay is going to be different than a movie video essay, but the quantity of things that were different and how they were different was really interesting. And part of that was solved by Wyatt, who was very intensely playing Horizon Zero Dawn. So I don't know if you want to talk about your first experience with it.
I forgot how hard this guy was at the beginning.
Well, the way the robots like jump at you so fast, like it's a really intense game as far as like just the speed and intensity of the battles.
Yeah, real quick, like you were saying, Alex, about just the sort of how you play this game, and I think it's a really good. It's sort of like whatever mood you're in, this game can work for it, because you can follow story stuff and like pay close attention, or you can take on some challenging machines and stuff and really be like, all right, I'm gonna beat this thing, or you can just run around and kind of have fun and like if you see a big machine you don't want to take on, you can just run away, kind of thing, and just be like, I'm gonna take on the medium machines. So it's a nice game for sort of like whatever mood you're in. It allows you to go do that, as any open world game should be, obviously, but this game didn't have to be sort of open world. It could have been, more linear, but it just works so well the way it's designed.
It does feel like it has that kind of perfect balance of there's stuff to just, if you just want to be in gameplay mode and fight dinosaurs for a while, there's plenty of opportunities for that. But like you're saying, you can also go into story mode, whether that's in I
was waiting for it.
Side quests or the main quest. And I think that's what made this game feel so captivating for me, is that it was like, I think what you're saying is exactly right. It's the perfect game for whatever mood that you're in. And so it was just, I think I hadn't played a game in a pretty long time that had all of those elements. There were some that I played for the gameplay experience, and I do a lot of like multiplayer games because I like game mechanics and all that stuff. And then I could do story games if I wanted like storytelling, and this was like a really fun hybrid that had all of those elements. And I remember being surprised at how affected I was by the story, and we kind of talk about this in the game, but the midpoint, and maybe we won't spoil past the midpoint for people that haven't played the game and maybe have only watched the video, but I remember there being turning points in this game where it's revealing the scope of the story and how hard they're going on the story. And that was something that I wasn't expecting from the game, because I think it could have been lighter on story and still been just as good. But the way that they slowly reveal all the deeper layers and how much of this story world they're going to explain was just really, really exciting. And Maker's End, I remember pausing and having to run and go tell my girlfriend, like, okay, so there's thing, okay, you don't understand, but there's she in the back and it doesn't matter, but it's really cool. And just like blabbering about how much I loved the story and those twists.
I remember when I first played it, like I had gotten recommended it from a friend who said it was like their favorite game of the year. I was like, it's a pretty big deal. And I like started playing through it, and it was like, a lot of games will have like the lore and stuff, and I'm not like super into like reading a lot of like the books and text in the game. But in this one, I was like, I wanted to read every single piece and listen to all of the audio and everything, which was like, I just got totally sucked in. Pretty cool.
Yeah, well, it's such a cool story world, and this is one of the things that we got to talk to John Gonzalez about that was really interesting, is how they put emotionality into all of those data points. And we talk about that a little bit in the video, but making sure that, yeah, he was saying that they wanted to make sure that there was emotion in every element of the lore. So when you're reading the text logs, they are little mini stories, or they're about relationships or connections with people, and audio logs are often the same. And as we point out in the video, audio logs allow for performance, and so it's always these kind of emotionally charged moments that you're hearing played back. And a lot of it tied into sort of what he was saying is like the greater theme of the game, and kind of the unifying themes, this sort of family and connection and relationships with other people. And so that theme is present in all those data points, and so it is doing it's just really good. But yeah, it's having all that emotion all the way down and all the elements.
It reminds me of when we talked to the Witcher 3 team about thematic cohesion, just kind of that's what I think is really impressive with a lot of these new games that are kind of taking a page from cinema, where you always want your film script to have thematic cohesion down from the big A story to the B story to the C story to all the characters are a character web that is exploring this theme. And I'm really impressed with so many of these games that are so much bigger than a single feature film as far as their complexity and amount of characters and amount of stories. Striving for that same kind of thematic cohesion is really, really impressive. So I think there have been big sprawling RPG open world games I've played in the past that haven't necessarily had the same kind of thematic cohesion. You can be in one part of the world and it feels like a different game or a different kind of tone than another part of the world, and it's cool to experience these more focused, thematically cohesive story worlds.
Yeah, I think it's very much a sign of maturity in storytelling, that it's clear when you have thematic cohesion, it signals that story isn't an afterthought, that like people care about the story and want to make sure it's all integrated and like a well-ironed story. So yeah, it's really fun to see more and more games doing that. Justin Hernandez asks, did we do the Metal World side quest one?
Did everything, but I don't remember that name.
Right, I feel like I did everything too. I'm trying to, I'll keep Googling it and see if we can figure it out, which one that is. Hammer and Steel, maybe? Bob the Builder talking about console exclusivity. It is a frustrating thing for sure, that it's like, I mean, that's how they get you and that's how they make money.
Yeah.
But it's also been kind of cool that more games are kind of coming to PC after the fact. It's been
it takes a few years.
Wait,
but,
yeah.
I am playing the PC one right now. And like, if you look at the clouds in the back, like you can still see there's some kind of like graphical glitches, and like the foxtails are kind of straight, like they don't move. So like, there's still some growing pains like porting over to PC, but
Sure, but also it looks freaking gorgeous.
Yeah. I mean, I have not noticed any of those things while watching this gameplay.
Like I wish the sky was pink like all the time in this game.
It's like 4K and 60 frames a second, which now we can do on consoles
right
forward. But
I think one thing to consider with exclusivity is like we should at the very I agree it sucks, but like we should appreciate that we could live in a world where no game was ever on more than one console. Because it was just like, we're Sony and these are the games we make, and we're Microsoft, these are the games we make, and we're Nintendo and these are the games we make, where like everything was only sold to one buyer, like either developed by the company that owns the console, or developed, Guerrilla only makes games for Sony and such only makes games for Microsoft and that kind of thing. So like I don't know what the future of this is, if they'll probably just always be this push-pull. But the fact that so often games come out on every system or come out on every system but one is certainly better than it could be, if nothing else.
Yeah. It'd be nice to see more like cross-platform purchasing. Like, I know that would probably mess up the economics of the game industry, but like buy Horizon Zero Dawn on PS4, and then you just own the game, whatever platform it's on, so you can go play it on PC.
Yeah.
And stuff. But I understand there's
That was my frustration with Kindles. Was like, hey, I just bought this hardcover of this book for $30, but now if I
Right.
want to read it on my Kindle, I have to go spend another $9.99 or something like that. And it's just like, but why?
Right.
And it would be nice if there was some version of that with all media. Basically, it's like once you buy this title, you own it in all cases, but they make less money that way.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely bought certain video games 4 times because I was like, well, now I need it for PC. Well, now I need it for, this console, whatever.
Maybe they'll never do crossplay or cross-buy because we keep doing that.
Right.
The same way.
Right.
I'm part of the problem that I'm upset about.
Yeah.
It's like how I've bought the Star Wars trilogy like 7 times at this point or whatever, and now I have Disney Plus.
And now it's on Disney Plus in like 4K. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think there's also the aspect of like the new PS5 controller. There's even like hardware differences for the upcoming PS5 exclusives that wouldn't be able to do some of the same mechanics even on an Xbox or on a PC. So as hardware gets even differentiated, that's another reason why like a Sony exclusive PS5 game might be its own thing that really can't be ported easily without losing some of the experience of like a physical trigger or the haptic feedback if that's integrated into the gameplay in a really like deep way. So that's it's clever of Sony to do that in some ways.
Right. Well, because even if it's not a Sony exclusive, if you like the haptic feedback that you can maybe only get on the PlayStation, maybe that's a reason to choose the PlayStation version over the PC version.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody's played Astro's Playroom, the kind of free PS5 game, it's like it is really cool. The haptic feedback, it's really fun.
Yeah, and as Chris points out, you can use a PS5 controller on PC, but PC games are not going to be programmed to use all. I mean, not yet. Who knows? But at least for now, it's just going to be sort of a standard controller. Whereas you play PS5 games on the PS5, and the controller is going to do whatever the developers have told it to do. Like Astro's Playroom is a great example of.
That's good to know that you can use it on PC, though. I didn't know that. I knew Xbox you could, but that's great.
Yeah. And there are like several like third-party apps. Like one I use is Rewasd or ReWASD, which lets you on the PC plug in a controller and then completely remap all the things. And with every update that add more features, you can customize like vibrations and like control the rumble that happens when you press a certain button or program several buttons to trigger in a certain way. So it'll be interesting to see if those third-party apps can get access to the PlayStation 5 controller and also let you unlock some of those things to mess with on yourself.
Yeah,
by yourself. One of the things I want to talk about that I think is kind of one of the biggest things in the video, and one of the things that was really fascinating to hear about when talking to John, is the idea of authored versus non-authored protagonists in RPGs. And I had never heard that term before talking to him, but it's such a clear distinction, and I think really affects how I relate to games. And in the Slack, we've had lots of conversations already about like, do we prefer authored or non-authored? And Brian and I get into fun arguments about like the different perspectives that we have.
Long essays, long blocks of essays. I open Slack and I'm like, whoa, what is happening here? It's like they're having like a dialectic discussion about RPG gaming.
Because we're nerds. But so that's, I kind of just want to talk about that and maybe hear from people in chat if they feel like they have preferences between authored and non-authored RPG characters. So authored, of course, being like the example used in the video is Joel from The Last of Us, who has a complete backstory that is set in stone. You can't change his story. You can't change the way he looks. He is a character that is preset, and you are playing that character. So that's one end of the spectrum. And then Fallout, Skyrim, where you can completely customize everything, kind of really shape your character to be who you want it to be, is kind of on the other end of the spectrum. So I'm curious to hear from people in chat what your thoughts are and if you have a preference. But Brian, since you're sort of the resident Fallout person, I feel like I just want to hear your thoughts on why, kind of what we were talking about the other day, of what you enjoy about having that kind of the freedom to design and imagine your own character in games?
Yeah, I think I just the first few times I encountered those games, probably Fallout 3, I was just I'm gonna make a character with a beard and a shaved head and name him Brian, and I'm gonna sort of play this game just roughly as I would play things. Once in a while I'm like, I wouldn't actually do this, but I don't want to not do this quest, so I had to like accept. But for the most part, just sort of trying to sort of play as me, and I'm not actually like imagining the character as me really, but it's just sort of like, okay, if I could place myself in this world, what would I do? What would I be? That kind of thing. And I think that was like the quickest way for me to get heavily involved in those kinds of games, RPGs. And then something cool happened. Well, so then like, I think it was Fallout 3, yeah, where then I played a second time and I was like, now I'm going to play as a complete opposite. I'm going to play as like a woman of color, and like, how do I now see the game when I'm looking at things through kind of different set of eyes, and what kind of choices does that make me something I was tolerant of as a white guy, I'm not tolerant of anymore, and I'm just like, no, I will not work with you, like under no circumstances. And I just thought that was really cool too. And then Fallout 4 actually I ended up playing the game many times because I was like, I want to keep designing new characters in the sense of what the actual character design is, the perks, and what I'm going to invest in and stuff. But then I'm going to sort of design a character around that, and like, why did they make this choice? If I'm doing a no guns challenge run, why does this character not believe in guns, and like, what does that belief make them, what choices does that make them make throughout the course of the game, and that kind of thing. So it became this sort of two sides of the same coin, one of which was being able to place myself in the game and experience the game as me, and the other of which was being able to create a character from scratch who still felt like they were sort of mine, in the sense of like, I had authored this person, I had decided who they were, and that's obviously a very different experience compared to playing Aloy or Geralt or Commander Shepard or somebody where it's sort of there's a spectrum of Commander Shepard where it's like, you still make a lot of choices, you still design them and stuff, but they are the commander of a ship and they will always do this and they will always do this and all the way to Last of Us, where it's like you have basically no control other than like, do I use arrows or shotguns? Like, you have no control over who that character is. Right. And then you have sort of like someone like Geralt who's kind of in the middle of all those things. But yeah, so it just became, for me, part of the fun of the game was this character that I was designing, whether it was supposed to be a reflection of myself or whether it was this sort of new character that I had developed.
It actually requires a lot of it. There's almost like a D&D kind of component there of like, you're holding kind of in the back of your head, you're holding together kind of like a character profile that you're like building and trying to maintain like a consistency of behavior. In that second example, where it's not just you, but you're actually trying to build like a person who is not you, yet you are trying to keep consistent. It's almost like a writing activity. Like you're building this entity that the game is not holding together for you. You are responsible for holding it together. I can just see that being a Brian, like a thing you would enjoy, like a challenge, almost like a writing or imagination challenge involved with that.
Yeah, and I think there's there's sort of a, even though games are an active, like by definition are an active medium, there is still an amount of passivity that a game can bring to it. If you're just sitting and watching cutscenes all day, then you start to feel a little bit removed from it. And as opposed to John Gonzalez, the writer of Horizon Zero Dawn, referred to it as a player-shaped hole, where in games like Fallout and Skyrim, you are placing yourself into the game, and then everything is sort of spreads out from there. And I think that just helps. Every second of the game, you are there, you are in control, you're having dialogue options and that kind of thing, compared to some games where you can be removed if you don't feel like you are this character, if you don't feel like you identify with this character or whatever. And that doesn't mean one's better than the other, it just means it's a different experience.
It's interesting because for me, like I sank as many hours into Skyrim as any other person. I got lost in that world and loved it, but I didn't have really an emotional experience in that game. Like,
sure.
it wasn't. It was more of like a awe and wonder and how cool is this that I can just do anything and be anything. It was fun for that reason, but I didn't have like Mass Effect was a really emotional experience for me. Last of Us Part 2, or both Last of Us games, extremely emotional experiences. So there's something about, for me, having an authored or at least semi-authored protagonist allows me to have a more cathartic, almost like cinematic emotional experience in a game story, whereas I'm curious what Cyberpunk 2077 is going to be like, because they are giving you the total freedom to create your own character from scratch. There's like 3 different life paths you can start from. You are in the player-shaped whole of the first-person perspective, yet it's the same people who made Witcher 3 building upon Witcher 3, which was a very emotional, story-based game. So I'm curious to see where it lands in that spectrum as far as the total freedom versus the kind of narrative control that you would think CD Projekt Red would want to have in your game experience.
Yeah, you can definitely see. I think it's going to be somewhere in that Geralt Commander Shepard kind of thing, where it's like you choose who this character is, but we still made a lot of choice in terms of like their attitude and their general how they present themselves and that kind of thing. Even though you are making a lot of decisions about their look and their origin and stuff. Yeah, what were you talking about? I agree. I didn't have an emotional experience with Skyrim based on the story. I had an emotional experience based on like the world and the atmosphere and the music and the visuals and stuff.
That's true. The atmosphere was emotional.
Yeah, but that you could see why Bethesda made the choice to put a voiced protagonist into Fallout 4, because it allowed these 2 great voice actors to come and give this emotional performance and to. You can hear all the weight of the emotion of your character in their performance, but now your character isn't anyone you want him to be. Now it's a character who sounds like this, and they even gave both the characters a backstory that you play through a little bit in the beginning. So it's a trade-off where now you get a more emotional, experience, a more emotional performance from your character, but you're no longer doing the Bethesda thing quite as much of this character is literally nameless, originless, raceless, genderless. Like I can completely shape everything about them, and so that upset a lot of people. They said that's not what I want from a Fallout game.
Right.
But at the same time, like the performances, Courtney Taylor and Brian T. Delaney, like their performances as the protagonist are fantastic, and it's unfortunate you can't sort of have all those things at once.
Yeah, it's kind of, it goes to this sort of core idea, I think, almost of what a story is, and that I think, a story is supposed to be, in general, taking a character on a journey of change, and there's usually a starting point where they have this flaw, this one thing that's wrong and that they need to change, and the story is about beating them over the head until they've changed that thing by the end. And if they changed it positively, it's a happy ending, and if not, it's a sad ending or whatever. And that basically necessitates having a specific character and, to a certain extent, a specific end if you're trying to tell that kind of story. So I think it makes sense for more story-based emotional games to have less choice, because as you open up more options, I think most stories don't have multiple endings that could be equally satisfying. Like, it's satisfying because of the one ending that there is.
Right.
And so I think that's interesting for games that are trying to tell that kind of emotional story. But like you're saying, Brian, there's like a different kind of experience that can be had when it's not about, when that isn't the one specific end goal. And I think the D&D comparison that you made, Alex, is what I was thinking also, because I played D&D, and it's really fun to have that complete freedom and design a character and completely control how they behave and what they do in a situation, and kind of create a story in your head. And I think with D&D, it's fun because it's like a shared imagination and a shared story. So there is a different kind of emotion that can come from a purely imaginative experience that can also be really powerful. Like, some of the most emotional experiences I've had in any thing, media. I guess D&D isn't media, but it was like in D&D when recently my character, who had a tragic backstory where his love sacrificed herself to save a small village after they had spent years and years wandering together, cleaning out undead from villages and stuff. But then she disappeared for a year and came back. And when she came back, she said, "Don't ask me any questions about what happened." And that was like the secret. Anyway, and so then it turns out all these years later, I arrive at this place and we start fighting with some random person, and then that person turns out to be my daughter. So like the DM is just like introduced, like, I have a surprise daughter with this like woman that I had this backstory with. And I was like really overcome with like the emotional weight of like, well, that's a lot of responsibility. Now I have a child. Like, what do I do? So like it's a different kind of storytelling and experience that you can have in those more imaginative situations. So I'm also excited, like you were saying, Alex, for Cyberpunk to see where it fits on that spectrum. And to kind of go back to what you were saying at the
I just have to say, Trisha says, "Wow," in response to that story, Michael.
For sure, we should play D&D. I think you would love D&D. We're gonna talk about this in the next meeting. We should all play D&D. But I know it's intense. But what you were saying, Brian, as far as like also allowing you to create characters that aren't yourself, I think is one of the coolest things about video games. And the first time I experienced that was with Mass Effect and playing as a female Commander Shepard, because when
Which
I
is
first
the best
played,
Shepard.
Fem Shep is best Shep. But when I first played it, I was 19 or 20 or whatever. I didn't even think about like, well, no, I wouldn't make a girl character because I'm a boy. I'm going to play as boy Shepard. But then after beating it, wanting to play it, probably I've played it twice before, thinking like, well, maybe I'll like try out playing it as like a female Shepard. And because you are identifying with a video game character in a way that you often aren't in a movie, it really did kind of open my eyes and allow me to have a different perspective of like, oh, this is what it's like to be a woman in this world. And I think what was cool about Mass Effect is that you don't really get treated differently for being a woman. Like Femshep gets the same amount of respect as Broshep, and I found that to be really powerful. But that is also just kind of speaking to that identification aspect of video games and how that can put you in somebody else's shoes in a very effective and powerful way. Hashtag The Last of Us Part 2. Lots of things to talk about.
Yeah, real quick, I want to jump in on Ron's question here. He said, it's something Michael and I have talked about. Wouldn't a sandbox game like Minecraft be on the far end of the unauthored character, since you, the player, get to fully decide the narrative? And yeah, that's like another level of this conversation, and it brings up this Psychology of Games podcast, which I listened to. They had a guest on who she was studying the different relationships we have with our avatars, and she had this like 4-tier sort of chart, and it was avatar as object, which is exactly what you're talking about with Minecraft or something, where like there is no player character really. It's just you are controlling a thing, or the player character, it's Pac-Man or whatever, like where it's there is no sort of character that's been built. And then there's an avatar as other, which would be like Joel and Ellie, that kind of thing, where it's like your character is somebody that you identify with, but they're very much removed from you. And then there's avatar as symbiote, which is somebody that you feel like you are personally connected to, like maybe my example of designing a character in Fallout who is not me, but is sort of somebody that I feel like I made this person. Probably like Commander Shepard would be a similar thing to that, where it's like they're authored to an extent, but then you have a lot of control. And then there's avatar as me, which is where you feel like you are the avatar, but then that sort of can like, it's almost like instead of two ends of a spectrum, it's almost like a circle, because then that can butt up against the sort of Minecraft thing where, because there is no avatar, then you sort of identify as the character, because there's no distance. It's not here's me, here's this character that I named Brian, and then here's the game. It's here's me and here's the game. So you're suddenly right there. So it's just really interesting. And then she talks about how different people have different relationships with their avatars and like what that means for their emotional connection to a game and everything. And you know, the sort of the cool thing was like all of her data was none of this is better or worse. It's just different people engage in different ways and different people like different things. And I think that's really cool because it means we're hopefully not getting to a point where it's like, well, now all games are this, because clearly there's like enough of an audience for all these different kinds of things that we can explore all these avenues. And I just think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. I think the closest thing that I have to what it sounds like your RPG Fallout experiences is with The Sims, because I play The Sims. I'm one of those people. I'm not ashamed to say it. And I feel like that is kind of doing this thing where I'm creating someone that it's not me, but it's not me. And it's also like I've decided that this character, Raul Eloso, the Sim, is going to he wants to be, you know, a pianist, a fancy pianist that gets all the money and all the blah blah blah, and so I play that character with that kind of character goal in mind, and choices that get made that are different than I would make because it's this character that I have this kind of co-authored, I don't know, feeling about. So anyway, that's all. I just want to mention The Sims because Sims is interesting. It's also the way EA funds everything, and I know EA is evil and all those things, but
I mean, I used to play The Sims. I used to spend hours in my little sim world, so I identify.
Well, yeah, it's also just about like games that allow you to create something. Like if you downloaded a save file of Horizon Zero Dawn, you could make whatever character you made recently, like, because there's only so many perks, there's only so many outfits, so you could easily just be like, here's the character I spent 20 hours 40 hours making before. Recently upgrading my PS4 to my PS5, I was like, I don't want to lose any of my Fallout 4 saves, not because of the characters, even their design, but because of all the settlement building you can do, where I'm like, I don't want to lose that building that I built for this character or that house that I built for this character. I want to be able to like load up that save file whenever I want and go visit these places. So I think whether it is your character or whether it is something like something you build, or Sims or Minecraft, where you sort of are, it's like games that allow you to put more of yourself into them and actually like represent yourself in a thing in the game that you can load up a save file and be like, look, that's me there and that's nobody else's thing, versus games like Horizon Zero Dawn, which are just, that's not what the game is. You know, you don't load up a Horizon Zero Dawn and be like, look at the world that I created. It's just, no, this is Aloy's world. This is here. You might play it in a different way. Two people may never play the game the same way, but it's not the same as having a game that you can sort of like emotionally reflect yourself onto and say like, look, I put myself here.
Yeah, for sure. I like that Sandra's having that weird first experience that you get when you have listened to someone for a long time and then see their face and you're like, that's not what I imagined, but also I didn't imagine anything.
Whenever I see the person who's like an NPR radio voice, I'm like, whoa, that's your face. That's weird.
I was really upset the first time I got a newsletter from Radiolab because it had the two of them.
Jed Eppenrod.
Yeah, Jed Eppenrod and Paul. Yeah. And I was like, no, I don't want to know what they look like. I just want to hear their voices.
Sandra, please make sketches of what you thought Alex and I looked like and then put them to us. We'd appreciate that.
How disappointing is the reality compared to the...
Yeah, well, so, and I think what you're talking about, Brian, is it's making me think about Minecraft again, and the interesting way that the games can trigger our brains in a like activities that our brains are good at doing in the real world get triggered in games also. So right now I'm thinking about like spatial construction, where like I can wander around Horizon Zero Dawn for hours and not know where I'm going or what's happening and not thinking too much about it, and then come back and play a month later and arrive at a corner of the world and be like, oh, I've been here before. like somehow exploring a three-dimensional world in a game is my brain is mapping that the same way it maps like a real space. And I think in Minecraft, I feel that really it also activates the kind of like emotional awe of certain things, where we talked about this on one of our podcast episodes, where I went to Yosemite at the beginning of this year in the before times. And you come out of this like tunnel and you turn, and it's just like this vista of like cliffs, and there's a waterfall and like greenery everywhere. And literally my first thought was like, oh, this is beautiful, just like Minecraft. I want to go play Minecraft, because I have these moments.
When you said that story, it's like me and Trisha were like,
right. But it's true, there are these moments that happen in Minecraft where you turn and see some canyon or some mountain, and you're kind of overcome with the awe and beauty of it. Yeah. And I think part of that is knowing, like you're saying, Brian, that like this is mine, like this is my world, this is the world that I live in, and I can shape it and I can change it. And there's this like relationship that you have with the blocky land that you find yourself in. And earlier this year also, so after that I did start playing Minecraft, and Wyatt and I started a Minecraft server, and Wyatt is very good at Minecrafting, let me say. But like we built our like a little nook home into like a little peninsula on a lake, and it was really pretty. And every time I would go off to travel to get whatever kind of oak wood I wanted to build my next thing and come back, my brain would be like, oh look, there's home. And I would have a little bit of that feeling of like, oh, I've arrived home. And so I just find that fascinating, that you can become emotionally invested in a space, and that your brain remembers and recognizes a virtual space that you've only seen through this window on your screen, or in VR, and we can talk about VR also.
Well, yeah, that's the funny thing, is I loaded up my I just got a Rift recently, and I was in like the Steam house, basically. It's like you load up Steam VR and you're in the kind of this cabin or whatever, and you can look around and you point and you click at whatever game you want to play. But then they have the other environments, and I looked over and looked at the environments, and one is called comfy cabin or cozy cabin or something like that, a comfy porch. So I click on it, and it takes me to this cabin, and I'm on the front porch, and it's like raining outside, and I'm in the woods, and I literally just sat down on my floor in my room. It was just like, this is nice. And it's just such a weird thing. It's like I'm in this virtual space and just sitting in the room I sit in all day, but instead I was just suddenly felt like I had been like, taken to a place that I had this like emotional connection with, even though I'd never been there before, virtually or otherwise, but yeah, that was kind of a funny thing. The other version of that I have is I was playing a bunch of GTA 5 back when it came out, which is set in a fictional Los Angeles, and live in Los Angeles. And so then like that weekend I went hiking with a friend, and she and I were like walking past the Hollywood sign. And if anyone has ever hiked up there, behind the Hollywood sign, there's like a gated area, and there's one of those like red and white like towers. And there's like a helipad. So she and I are hiking, and then I see a helicopter land on the helipad over in the distance on this thing, and I suddenly just went, whoa. And she goes, what? And I was like, I just did that like yesterday. I was like, I was here, and like I was in the helicopter, and I landed there, or whatever. And it was just this weird feeling where I felt like I had been somewhere in a game and real life, which it's fun, especially games that take place in New York or Boston or LA or whatever. It's like you can visit the locations in the game and then see them in real life, or vice versa. My mom was visiting, and we went and walked around Santa Monica Pier, and then we came home, and then I showed her that in GTA. I was like, see, remember that building that we looked at? There it is. And it's just, there's something cool about that.
Well, it's interesting thinking about just like how our brains evolved. Like Michael, a lot of the emotions you were talking about in Minecraft, and like I feel like there's like deep evolutionary triggers that are being triggered by a virtual world, which I don't know if our brains really differentiate that much from the real world. And you mentioned, Brian, it almost kind of made me sad hearing about your VR experience, because it's like our brains are craving to be in a forest, in a cozy place. Like that's more natural than our like apartment in the city. And it's like I think there's like some deep needs, or Michael, you talking about like going out and almost like foraging and then coming to a safe home. Like these are primal kind of like ways that we're programmed to like live and experience like day-to-day reality, and most of our lives, especially this year, are inside a box. And so it's interesting how we're kind of getting what we were programmed to receive as just a natural part of life from virtual worlds now. Like our modern lifestyles are not giving us our evolutionary needs, and so we're getting them from artificial worlds, which is very interesting.
But I also think it's not just like we're trying to go back to our like primal state, because I feel like, you know, I lived in Philadelphia for several years, and it's like if I was stuck in a cabin in the woods for 5 years, like or if that's just where I moved to because that's where I chose to move to, being able to put on VR and walk around the streets of Philly and like hear all the traffic,
right?
And, you know, like that would be great too. It's not just about like, oh, we need to go back to our like anthropological roots or whatever.
Right. I think it's more of the feeling of awe that I had like in Skyrim, for example, where like you don't know everything. Like you don't have Google Maps, you don't know what's around the corner. You can discover a hidden valley that's just like magical. Like those experiences aren't really open to us very much. You know, like even if we go on to a national park or something, like you still have to kind of do a lot of work to get into a situation where you can discover a magical hidden valley you didn't know was there. Like you probably have a plan and you know where you're hiking and there's a hiking trail and there's like safety involved. Like, so I guess we can safely have these magical experiences in the virtual world that we just don't really have anymore in real life.
Right.
Which I think our brain kind of wants to have.
It's like the best case scenario. Like,
or like Michael can have the adventure, but from the complete safety.
You can be comfortable at home, but still fulfill those adventuring needs and the safety of your own home. But it's true. I think that's one of the things that's most striking to me about Minecraft is how. I think primal is a good word. Like I think it activates a part of my brain that does feel like it's from the caveman times. Like it was useful to think about like, well, there are monsters at night, I need to be safe, so how do I build shelter? First I just care about become comfortable, and so then maybe you like decorate, and then you craft for the first time, like start from zero. Larry, yes, Trisha Minecraft playthrough.
Yes.
And it's also for that reason fun to watch other people play it, because you get to see what their kind of primal brain cares about. Like I'm very much about like setting up farming as soon as possible. Like I want to make sure there's some kind of system in place where there's infinite food and infinite shelter, and I don't have to worry about anything, and then I can kind of relax and do other stuff. But some people like to go cave diving and explore the dark corners of the world. And yeah, I think it's interesting to reveal how games that are that open, and this kind of goes back to Fallout also, where you can create your own character. It also lets people express themselves and like their personalities and the things that they care about. And then it's like a fun way to see that in other people and talk about it and communicate and bond over it.
Yeah, there's like so many different boxes that can get checked by different games. There's exploring a world that somebody else has created and then running into characters too, like whether it's just the world or whether it's also like you run into characters, you can have a conversation with them. And then there is expressing yourself by the things you build and that kind of thing. And then there is the conflict and the danger that, you know, hopefully you don't experience when you go hiking, or you don't want to experience when you go hiking. Like you can turn a corner and see a beautiful waterfall, but you don't want to run into a bear and have to run away from it. And part of the fun of playing an open world game, especially for the first time, is not knowing what's around every corner, for better or for worse. So you might turn a corner and find this really cool conversation or this really cool setting, a valley or whatever, or you might turn a corner and run into a monster you had no idea even existed in the game, and holy crap, you have to run away as quickly as possible. And I think that's part of the fun of it too, is like you get to, like you said, it's the best of all worlds. You get to experience the danger and the conflict that you would want to see if you were watching a movie, but not what you would want to see if you're, you know, in real life. But you are playing, so you are sort of experiencing it, but from a safe distance.
Right. Sorry, I'm now just looking at the animal that Wyatt is fighting, and why are you killing this cute robot wolf?
It's so hard. It's so cute.
With its ears. I really like it.
I thought I had really quick about just watching Wyatt play right now, like just going back to the primal thing for a second. Like this game especially is on the surface very primal, like the experience of hunting, you know, where you're having to use stealth and hide in the tall grass and really be clever about how you approach robot animals. Like I that definitely put me very literally in like a hunter-gatherer mindset in this game, which was really fun. Sorry, tangent.
No, yeah, that's true. Well, and I think that's why animals play also, is to practice their skills that they need to live.
Getting real deep.
Post-apocalyptic preparation here.
Well, I mean, more just like that. Yeah, I think that's why there's so many games that are about hunting or killing or fighting and all that stuff, is that there is like, those are primal skills that we need to have. And so to have that part of our brain exercised feels good, because I think we are biologically wired to, like, that's why kids run around and like play and fight and all, like that's why cats like fight with each other, but like only kind of, but they're practicing the skills that they need to use when they need to kill a bison or whatever the hell they're doing. So I think there is just like a deep connection, or a deep reason why we enjoy playing primal things. Ron, yeah, I like your comment about game loops, and that kind of a game loop of setting a goal, figuring out how to do it, hopefully succeeding, and then in that process realizing the time has vanished. And I think that's how I felt a lot about Outer Wilds, which we just did a video about. Because there is
loop and thought,
yeah, loop.
But yeah, that sorry, I like Taylor Adams' comment. I just want to commend Wyatt for exhibiting zero emotion playing through this game. Stone-faced killer.
That's just Wyatt. He is emotionless.
I don't know, man.
It's a lot of focus and concentration.
I felt
it's also
I died.
Oh, did you die?
I did. I really.
Oh.
I'm really
I was riveted. I was like,
guys.
he's gonna die live. He's gonna die live. Use the tear blast arrow or whatever. Get the components up.
You've embarrassed all of us, Wyatt. We're shutting down the
I
channel.
apologize.
Yeah. Our game capture artist can't die on screen.
Failed.
But anyway, yeah, just the Outer Wilds game loop, and the idea of thinking about games in that game loop terminology is really interesting. But that's why I found Outer Wilds very satisfying, and I think why I also like simulation games kind of in general. I think that's why I like The Sims. That's why I like all the roller coaster tycoon games and the Sim Cities and the City Skylines, where games where it's like, here's a bunch of tools, now you get inspired to create a goal for yourself, and then you go out and you attack that goal until you figure it out, and then you feel some kind of reward. And I think the most extreme example I've felt of this was in Minecraft, where I had started my main base home, and then I'd gone down into the caves, and there was like, I was mining, finding lots of things, but then I turned a corner and there was this huge cave that had a bunch of scary monsters in it. And I was like, I don't want to go into the cave with the scary monsters, but I want to go into the cave. And so I decided that the best way to make the cave not scary is to bring sunlight into the cave. And so the cave was beneath a huge mountain. So I decided, well, I'm going to block by block remove this mountain. And I spent about a day and a half of my life just like line by line trying to remove a mountain from the world.
That's amazing.
And you really get a sense of how like exponential growth works, because the top of a mountain is pretty small, but every line, like every further down you go in the mountain, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's so after spending like 36 hours on it, I was like, I need to give up on this mountain. But I feel like that also expresses a key part of my personality, which is like, I've decided this is a thing that I want, and now my brain will only care about making that thing.
Right.
Because it's impressive, because like with that kind of a challenge, I think I'd probably stop as soon as I realized like this is going to take 36 hours. But like you stick through it for 36 hours until you've really expended all possibility of completion.
I've definitely done that kind of stuff in Fallout 4's building like settlement mode. I recreated my dad's apartment
Wow.
where I go to visit, where I stay over the holidays and stuff, and just to see if I could do it, and I like was able to do it enough where I could like walk around inside and just feel like, yeah, this kind of feels right. And then I was playing around with these light boxes where Fallout 4 lets you like generate power, and then you can do like logic gates where if this happens then that happens, or you like flip a switch or whatever. So then there's these light boxes that you snap together and you can make this giant grid. And I was like, what could I do? And I'm at this place, the castle, and you don't want anyone to come in. You want to keep all the raiders off and everything. So I made this giant light grid with a blue background and yellow text, because Fallout colors, that just said "fuck off," and it flashed, and the words flashed, and it's like basically, I don't know, 30 times the size of a person or something. So you walk in and just there it is. And it was just a dumb thing where I was like, I just wanted to do this, but that involves like having to go find copper in the world and like actually go and scrounge for junk so I could build this stupid thing. But I wanted to do it. And once I decided I wanted to do it, I was like, well, there it is.
This is what we do for fun.
That's why I need that save file, so I can go and see my flashing sign anytime I want.
Right.
And show it to people who are then like, you are a waste of space.
You have spent too much time on this.
Yeah.
But there is I think Outer Wilds was an example of a game that, why I usually don't have the patience for what you guys are talking about, at least in my like recent life. Outer Wilds, like the game did not hold your hand. It was really up to you to figure out what the hell's going on here and what to do next. But the revelations came often enough that in Outer Wilds, once you figure something out, once you unlock something, it's such a thrill because you didn't really even know if you could do it or what it was or like what the hell like you can even do. And once something clicks in that game, the adrenaline and like dopamine rush is so strong. It's such a motivator to keep going and to like, even though it's frustrating as hell, like experiment and see what you can do on this other planet and keep exploring. So there's something about the like pace that Outer Wilds managed to do that worked for me. Of this game is almost like impossibly frustrating at times, and yet there's enough revelations, enough like turning points that are so rewarding that I'm going to stick with it and I'm going to keep trying to figure this out, because that it just feels so good after all by yourself, essentially without handholding, using your brain to put something together. There is a deeper reward in that than a game where it's like complete this level, beat all the bad guys, just get to the next part. There's that open world all by yourselfness that feels more like real almost. Like the thing you overcame was like a real thing. It wasn't a constructed thing that you were always going to get through.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a sweet spot in the game loop where it's like, because something that happens when people like see me playing The Sims, or I tell people that I play The Sims, is they're like, well, why don't you just live your real life better? Like, why don't you just do those things in real life? Which is like a fair thought. But I think there's, it can happen faster, and so you still get the dopamine hit of like, oh, I accomplished this thing. I learned a new skill today, without having to spend all the amount of time that it takes to do that in real life. And I think there is this kind of sweet spot maybe where things are hard enough that you do have to put in the energy and work for the thing to make it feel worth it when you get it, but it doesn't take so long that you're not, that it's like a real life time scale where it's like, well, if it takes this long to do this thing, I should probably just stop playing this game and go live my life and learn a new skill. And I feel like Outer Wilds has that. There's enough, it's the right amount of time between setting the goal and the frustration and the payoff to make it like worth continuing over and over again.
Well, there's things like, Job Simulator, in VR, where it's like you are just in an office cubicle or you're a convenience store clerk and you just have to do tasks. And that sounds like the stupidest thing ever. But first of all, there's like it's just a really funny game in the sense of they just there's a lot of humor to it in the way they do everything. Like you hit a button that says "I heart job," you know, like that's one of your tasks or whatever. But then also there's like the chaos element where you can't go into a convenience store and like take someone's hat off and put it on your own head or like just throw things across the floor, but you can in VR. It's just the added, or you know, in GTA, it's like, yeah, I could actually go to Santa Monica Pier, but I couldn't like, you know, steal a car and drive off with it. And you know, one of the most satisfying things in GTA 5 was for me was being able to drive on the freeway fast. Because if you live in LA, that's not something you ever get to do. I mean, well, maybe in like March and April of this year, but normally it's not something you get to do.
Or like 2 a.m. on the Sunday.
Exactly. But yeah, there's that sort of that element of, yeah, you're doing a normal thing that you could do in real life, but you get to do things you couldn't do.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge Ian's question about roguelites and the roguelikes and the appeal of those. I feel like I need to play more of them. Like I know Hades is a huge thing that's happening. I haven't played that. I think FTL is maybe the only one that I've played, and I did get pretty obsessed with that.
Can you define roguelike? Because I hear it used in context a lot, but I'm not a deep enough gamer to like totally know the definition of like where does a game become roguelike or not, or roguelike late, not like.
It's a little complicated because there's like there's some drama behind it too. Because like it's based off of like an old game called Rogue. And the thing is, like, if your game isn't almost like a carbon copy of Rogue, then people say, well, that's a rogue light, or like, you know, if there are if it's not turn based, or so there's all these elements of Rogue that made it what it is. And so there's kind of this idea that like people get really protective of, but I think in the end the main thing is that it has like permadeath. So like each run,
right,
like when you play through a game, you can beat it or you die, and that's it, and then you have to start all over again.
Start from scratch.
Yeah, I think that's like kind of one of the main aspects of it that sets it apart.
Which I remember Alex Beecham, when talking about Outer Wilds, you know, it's kind of in that family, you know, where it has the time loop, and you have essentially a computer console in the game that does like remember stuff, you know, it remembers places you've been, and kind of so you can reference that. But I do feel like Outs gave me a little bit of that feeling of, you know, there are real consequences if you die. If you've gone into the place with all the angler fish and you've gotten all the way to something inside there and then you die, it's like it's a big loss. Like you have to do the whole run again to get past all those obstacles to get back to that place. You can't just load a save game. But I don't think it is categorized as a rogue game in that way, but it's got that kind of vibe or the inspiration.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't never thought about Outer Wilds in that way. It's kind of interesting. I think another part of it.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think another part of it too is that like when every time you play, there's a lot of randomized stuff. That's the main difference between like most roguelikes and Outer Wilds, is that like the items that you get are random, the layout of the dungeon is random. Like using that random element to make it feel kind of fresh or different every time is what kind of makes it so replayable.
Which also annoyed me a lot in FTL. Like can a game be balanced if it's random, or is that the point, is that it isn't balanced and just every time it's different? Because ultimately with FTL it was like I could tell, you know, 10% of the way through my run through whether or not I'd be able to successfully make it or not. And so I would sometimes just quit earlier in the game and just kill myself because it's not worth the time investment. And so that's why I'm curious to play Hades and kind of get more into this genre of game, because I did really love FTL and spent a lot of time on it. So I think there's a part of my personality that would really enjoy those games.
I definitely committed suicide all the time in Outer Wilds. Right. I was just like, I need to get back to the beginning.
It really creates the Groundhog Day feeling, where at first you're like, I don't want to die, and then like by day 200 you're like, just kill me. Right. That's just what to do. Taylor Adams asks, where do we think the story of Horizon Forbidden West will go? It's a good question. What do you guys want? Or do you even have any expectations or desire of what you want to see the story continue?
I mean, my impression is just that it's like in a new place, right? I mean, it's kind of like we're just in a new land with new challenges. But yeah, I haven't finished the story, so
That's right.
I don't
You
know.
haven't finished the game.
I don't know how spoiler we want to get on the show. It's also fine if you spoil the end of the game for me, because at this point I'm just enjoying it, not just for the story but for everything else about it. So if you want to talk about the ending, if we want to do that here, that's fine with me.
I feel like there's maybe a way. I feel like I can talk about it in a way that doesn't spoil the ending of this game.
I mean, I know she obviously lives because she's in the trailers for the new game. So yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I'm most curious about for the second one is, can they recapture the awe and the revelations of the story in this game? Because it feels like the problem that a lot of sequels have, which is all the things we talk about in the video of how deeply connected Aloy's journey is to the story world. Like, that's what this game is. And so like it's just that holistic approach that makes it super special, but you can kind of only do that once. Like, once you know who Aloy is and the connection and all that, like that's been spent. And so in a second one, can you still have as engrossing a story without that the mystery of the story world there? Because now we know the backstory of the story world. So that's what I'm curious about, is what is the story, what is the mystery, and is it going to be as compelling when it kind of necessarily can't be as big as what is this world that you're in? Or are they going to try to find a way to make, well, you only know half of the story of the world that you're in, but I think that could get messy really really quickly. So I don't know. So those are my thoughts.
It's actually interesting to think about it in terms of this expansion, because this is like kind of delving into, well, at least as far as I know, like Silent's backstory. I'm sure there's other things that get revealed, but like Silent's a really mysterious character, and he tells you not to go up here, and you're like, I'm gonna go anyways. Figure it out myself. And so yeah, so like you're here like trying to figure out kind of what his deal is, since he's like telling you what to do. I wonder if they're gonna get into like other characters' backstories, or
yeah, I think weirdly I'm more interested in old world storytelling than sort of Aloy's future, in the sense of like telling more of that backstory of how things went from point A to point B and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know how much they're going to go into that, but it's like I'm excited to see, what adventures Aloy gets into, but I'm also just excited to keep learning more about the origin of this world.
Yeah, it was interesting when I saw the trailer. I saw one of the first trailers for the new game. I was kind of like confused, because just like, so like the first game I know has these big revelations about the origin of the story world and how, she's connected to this woman who created Horizon or Zero Dawn, whatever that is. And so it kind of felt to me like if a game is about like solving the mystery of the story world, it almost feels like the story ends with that. Like it feels like if it's about this epic meta story of how this world came to be, it almost seems like the stakes are lower for a sequel, where it's just like, now we're just gonna keep wandering around this story world now that we know what it is. And you almost needed to have another big existential thing,
right,
to match the feeling of the first game. If it is just like, this world was created, it is what it is now, and now we're just kind of like indefinitely dealing with what it is, doesn't have the same kind of narrative momentum. So
I wonder, maybe
we'll see what they do.
Maybe that's like a question for you guys, is like, how how deep do you get to different characters' backstories before it becomes kind of boring?
Well, I feel like you have to care about the characters to want to know more about them, and I feel like Silence is interesting, and they reveal a fair amount of his backstory in this, but I can't think of like off the top of my head like other characters who I want to know the backstory for in this game. But maybe that's
Yeah.
also part of why it's a new setting, a new place. I'm sure there'll be new characters, and so there might be an opportunity to introduce new people that we do care about and kind of use that as the way into the story.
And I will say, now that I've just spent more time not worrying about even the main quest and just enjoying the game in all of its other ways, like the gameplay is fun and rewarding enough that if it's just like even better version of this gameplay, that's still going to be a great game, really fun.
Right.
I mean, I have the same epic narrative feeling, but could still be really fantastic.
Yeah. Cool. So we're getting close to 11, which is when we want to wrap up. So if there are any questions you guys want to ask that we haven't touched on, feel free to ask them really quick. I don't know how deep we are into the DLC. We were never going to do all of it, but
well, one thing that I was just
One
thing I was thinking of, because we were just talking about how much this game relies upon that like protagonist story world connection. Are there any other games that have really done as deep a connection as far as like the narrative is actually about revealing the protagonist's like connection to like the origin of the story worlds, or is this kind of a unique game in that way?
I think it's a unique medium, like a unique in any medium almost, like how deep the connection is. I think that's kind of what I'm struck by. Sorry, Brian, you're going to say something.
Me? No. I mean, there's just so many games that like I would imagine some game has done that, but not necessarily like a AAA title.
Right.
Like some, like who knows? Because it's crazy how many. It's awesome and crazy how many games there are these days. But yeah, I think movies you might be able to find some stuff like you have sort of a Minority Report kind of thing where it's like we did a video about how the story world is the antagonist, but it's sort of like the story world is co-created by the person who is then the problem is created for them and then they have to take down the story world in order to, so it's like this cyclical kind of thing, especially in the book where he is the one who created pre-crime. But yeah, I can't think of off the top of my head another game where it's that closely connected.
There are things like, I mean, I think The Last of Us in some ways is that, where it's like it's about Ellie,
Sure.
and Ellie has the cure to the virus that is the story world. So I feel like that's probably as close as, or there are probably other stories that have that kind of model where it's like it's a personal story about this character, but also what happens to that character will determine the fate of the universe and the world. Like there's a lot of like, that's what Star Wars is kind of,
like Harry Potter. Yeah.
Right. So I feel like that's kind of common, but yeah, the deep, like one-to-one, she is I don't know. There's
the literal connection.
Yeah. Special about it here.
Speaking of The Last of Us, I think we said I think we talked about in our podcast on The Last of Us Part 2, how the world of Last of Us Part 2, I think Sage might have said this, is like was created by Joel's at the end of the first game.
Right.
So that's another example of like the story world itself is a result of a character's actions. And the second game is basically dealing with the consequences of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun to have Sage on. Sage Hayden from Just Right, the YouTube channel. If you don't know, go subscribe. It's great. Larry has a couple questions. How did you guys decide on the first few games for story mode videos? I mean, it was sort of like a combination of what are games that we love and who can we get to talk to us. I feel like with Outer Wilds, it was almost like there's a studio because we've been developing this for a pretty long time. So like from back when you could go and interview people in person. So one of the things
before
was
times.
Like, what are studios that are nearby in LA? And one of them was Mobius. And I'd heard lots of good things about Outer Wilds. So it was like, well, let's reach out to them and let's play that game. Oh my God, I love this game. Let's definitely do something with them. And yeah, Horizon Zero Dawn, there'd been, again, it's a game that I just really love, and I knew that John Gonzalez knew of the channel because he had sent me that message that I missed way back when. So I thought there's a decent chance that he'd be down. Yeah, and then The Witcher was, I mean, it's The Witcher. We tried really hard to do Cyberpunk and try to get something to come out kind of coinciding with that. But they're very,
like, how do you do that with a game that we're not allowed to play yet and that kind of stuff?
And also, like, it was getting delayed, and everybody's,
Right.
Everybody CD Projekt Red is not worrying about, like, doing a story mode video right now.
Yeah, right.
Which was actually really great, though, that we got Pavel from. He's on the Cyberpunk team, and he made the time to sit down with us, which was so awesome.
Yeah. And then the other one, The Outer Worlds, was my pitch, which I was playing the game, and just like the character Parvati just struck me as someone who I thought was really well designed. So I said, let's do a video about companions.
Yeah. So it felt like a nice kind of broad-ish slate, of things to touch on. And
We're open to
Larry's
suggestions too. If people have ideas.
I mean, any Mass Effect fans out there,
we gotta do Mass Effect.
We're gonna do Mass Effect. We gotta get those BioWare guys.
Yeah. Larry also asked, maybe it's just a follow-up. Was it more practical interviews or games in mind? Yeah. So it was a combination. Again, it was like COVID being awful, obviously, sucks, but in some ways freed us up to be okay with just doing remote interviews. Like at one point there was a conversation that was how much does it cost to fly to Poland and shoot an interview with the CD Projekt Red team?
So funny, we used to think we had to do that.
Yeah. And like obviously we want quality interviews, but I think people are okay with Zoom call audio, and we've Wyatt works with each interview person to send them a microphone, so the audio quality is at least nicer than just like a laptop audio and stuff like that. And Larry,
I think you'll be happy. I think you'll be happy, Larry.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, Larry.
I also, really quick, I just was thinking, did you guys ever play Infamous?
No.
It's like the one where you're like kind of a superhero. You can like glide on power cables and stuff.
Oh,
it's
yeah, I did.
Yeah. Spoiler for that game, but I just remember that the ending of that game is you find out that the bad guy is like a twisted version of yourself from the future. So like the actions of the game causes you to like go back and then become the villain of. So I don't remember if it's like the origin of the story or whatever, but yeah. So I just had to mention that before we jumped off.
That's a neat twist. I like that.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, cool. Well, I think we're gonna wrap up. This has been really fun. Thank you, Wyatt, for being our gameplay master. As always.
It's been very like soothing to watch you run around this cave and like turn on lights or something.
Yeah, this game is so gorgeous.
Yeah,
it's nice. It's so pretty.
Yeah. But thank you everyone for joining. So we are going to have another video next month. Obviously, Larry, stay tuned, as we were saying. If you want to help us make videos, we have a Patreon. The link to that is in the description below. We want to focus on quality over quantity with this channel. And as we kind of hinted at the very beginning, making video essays about games is more, I don't know about more. It's time consuming in a different way than making videos about movies, because movies are 2 hours long and games are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 long.
Yeah.
And we're not just always using old gameplay that we captured. We have to go back in and like find the cinematic version of the gameplay we already captured. And so it's like kind of have to do things twice.
And as an editor,
get like a cinematic camera mod. And
I have like a wish list for Wyatt for every game, which is like, 200 items long of like, we need B-roll of this village and we need aerial shots of this. And like, can you hack the game to get that? So there's a lot of weird hidden work that goes into these videos.
it's basically, it's almost like shooting a movie, because Wyatt basically has to
Right.
go out and shoot B-roll. And so like, and if we want a shot that's like revealing the Bloody Baron, he has to
Right.
like set up the camera and like trick it to be the right like zoom FOV, and then like do the camera move, but maybe the game didn't cooperate, so you got to do it again, or then maybe you're clipping and something gets in the way. Anyway, so it's really fun to make these videos, but it does take a lot of time and work. So any support would be very much appreciated. Even just subscribing and liking and sharing the videos, obviously, we very much appreciate. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We're really, it's fun. We've been working on story mode for a long time, and it's fun to have it exist now and be getting to talk to you guys, and it's real, which is really fun. And I think
Yeah,
it's
been
the
over a
future
year
it's
of
gonna be
us
great.
planning this and everything, so it's really nice for it to be out in the world.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, cool. Well, we're
Thanks,
going
everyone.
to wrap it up there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Have a
Adios.
good
You
day.
guys. Thank you.
Bye.